Pushing past the row, Janus found the warehouse door bolt pulled back and the door left ajar. She dropped to one knee to inspect a broken padlock, then rose and turned.
Hold position. Inform me of any contact,
she instructed, attaching a stab light to her bolt pistol as she spoke.
You mean beyond your mummified kin?
Smirked Dranikir. Janus shot him a look and he raised both hands in mock submission. She valued his counsel, but the Eldari lack of compassion was grating at times. She turned and opened the warehouse door, its hinges creaking quietly. As she stepped inside, she raised her pistol and stopped dead, her breath caught in her throat. Several feet back from the door stood more of the frozen wretches, the row they stood in stretching into the darkness on either side. They held the same agonized pose, silently crying out for something or someone that would never heed their call. She raised her pistol and the stab light beam illuminated another row behind the first, and another behind that. Looking back, she spotted a promethium drum next to the door. She climbed up and trained her pistol over the first few rows. A sea of twisted, eyeless faces as far as the light could penetrate stared back at her.
I've found the rest of Koltar's occupants,
she said over the comms.
Any survivors?
Replied Emmeline after a short delay.
Not in any state worth saving, all corrupted like those outside.
Thrown. How many?
Hard to tell, but based on the size of the depot and approach, likely tens of thousands. Maybe more.
It took a few moments for all three to realize what this meant.
Your techs were wrong. Those heat signatures weren't power stations at all.
Emmeline spat.
Filthy taint.
As the scale of the horror set in, something caught Janus's eye from her perch atop the fuel drum. She dropped her pistol and allowed her eyes to readjust to the darkness. To the right of the enormous space, a light flickered. It was so faint that to stare at it for longer than a few seconds would cause it to all but disappear as the dark battled for dominance. She looked up and saw the weak light occasionally jostle the black cloaked ceiling directly above it.
I've got something. Keep guard,
she instructed as she jumped down from the barrel.
Acknowledged.
Janus pushed between the two nearest figures. Despite their cadaverous demeanor, she was surprised at how easily they could be pushed aside without toppling. The skin of the tortured souls was withered, almost translucent and ice cold to the touch. Unsure of the exact brand of sorcery at play, she did her best not to make direct contact, using her elbows and weapon to prise a path before her, but it was unavoidable at points. An unnatural cold occasionally reached out and chilled her to her core. As she waded through the body, she realized the experience was unsettlingly familiar. Visions of her childhood on Fronteras bubbled up to the surface of her consciousness, memories of pushing through the 10-foot-high bean pods of the Agri-World's colossal plains. Like the crops of her homeworld, the bodies around her bent away and sprung back as if rooted in the ground, roots that would never grow in a field of death. After 10 minutes, she emerged on the adjacent edge of the ghoulish gathering. Stepping into the narrow, unoccupied space along the wall, she found herself a few feet away from the light source, a number of large candles set around an opening in the wall. As she moved closer, the opening revealed a stairway leading down into the murky depths of the depot's basement. The stairs curved to the left, where a faint light strained to escape the gloom. She checked her bolt pistol.
Found a light. Moving to basement level. May lose comms. Stay put.
Understood.
Rounding the bend, the light intensified, as did the smell. Rot and decay, festering and damp. A few more steps and the putrid stench was given a source. Body parts littered the stairwell. On closer inspection, Janus discovered these parts were not torn and ripped from their former owners, but removed surgically. In some instances, the wounds were cauterized. While trying to wrap her head around this strange practice, its mystery was rapidly diminished in importance as the next collection of parts offered a more pressing horror. Dismembered and decapitated torsos of various shapes and sizes lay to the right of the stairs. Unlike the parts strewn further up the stairwell, they appeared to have been placed there purposely, propped up against the wall as if on display. Where their limbs once were, an array of different appendages now protruded, some organic, some not. She recognized a number of animal parts, both land and sea, as well as metal contraptions, tools, and weapons. The most unsettling thing about this grotesque exhibition was that, try as she might, Janus could not see a single stitch or joint. It was as if they had been born with such deformities, each supposedly separate entity merging into the next seamlessly. She continued her descent and the horror show evolved, as if building to a grand and grisly crescendo. Every step revealed new ways to defile the human form, some so bizarre she could not quite make out what she was looking at. Such deformation would have reduced the mind of the lay to a quivering wreck. Her training, however, the ability to filter out anything that was not mission critical, had kicked in the moment she saw the first severed parts. She often thought of it as a form of psychic blinker, channeling her focus forward. She paused for a moment as the sound of chanting drifted up the stairs to meet her, monotoned and inhuman, like a picked recording played backwards. Whatever awaited her at the bottom was not alone. Shortly after she started moving again, she found the light source, candles jammed into cracks in the walls. The foul odour they gave off made it clear the macabre sculptures were not the only way the victims' remains were being repurposed. The twisted economy made her grimace. Outside, Dranikir leant against the warehouse wall behind the row of frozen civilians, while Emmeline stood guard, training her weapon down the street to their right.
Will you settle down, sister? We're clearly alone. Auspex would have told us long ago if there was anything alive out there. Well, anything properly alive.
He smirked as he prodded the nearest human statue with his pistol.
Silence, Xenos. I can't concentrate with all your wittering,
barked Emmeline in a hushed tone. She panned across the rooftops. He was right though, and she knew it. There was nothing but dust and wind around them, but she hadn't survived this long without diligence being the cornerstone of her approach to every potential combat situation.
I said silence,
she snapped, whirling on him, but he was already on his feet. He raised his hand toward her, but his gaze was fixed directly on the backs of the ghostly figures. Emmeline turned to look into the hollow sockets of the nearest and moved forward, cocking her head to one side as an unsettling sound grew from its contorted mouth, an eerie, guttural chant. The display of mutilated bodies had stopped. In its place, more humans locked in rigor mortis lined both walls of the stairwell, all facing the wall. It was clear now the chanting was coming from these tortured souls, the sound projecting unnaturally from their immobilized larynx. 40 feet past the start of the wall-facing choir, the stairs ended at a large open doorway, through which more of the choir could be seen. As Janus approached, she saw they were all standing in rows facing the opposite end of a dimly lit room, with an aisle cut between them. Crouching to use the darkness as cover, she edged forward. The chanting was reaching fever pitch now, the inhuman sound inducing nausea as her ears began to ring and a dull headache began to take hold. At the front of the gathering stood a hooded figure, hunched over a large table perpendicular to the aisle. The table was covered in a dirty, blood-splattered sheet, under which lay a body, its feet pressing out toward the congregation. A feeling of dread began to rise in her. She stopped at the final row as the clamour reached the pain threshold and she started to wince. As she put a hand to the floor to steady herself, she looked up and saw the hooded figure slowly raise a large, ornate dagger, gripping it in two hands and flexing his whole body to strike. Moments later, he brought the blade down as Janus broke cover and dove toward him.
Get away from my brother, you heretic scum!
She yelled over the din as she slammed her shoulder into the hooded figure's side and sent it sprawling across the floor in a crumpled heap.
Sweet Aisha's tears,
exclaimed Dranakir, backing away as the chanting abomination suddenly lifted off the ground. Emmeline stumbled backwards, similarly shocked by the sudden ascension. The row simultaneously rose and hovered several feet above the ground. The chanting was ear-splitting, making their vision blur and heads spin. Looking up, Emmeline saw a light begin to emanate from the row, reaching up into the clouds in a solid column. Another 2 columns rose to pierce the sky on the horizon.
Throne, look!
She exclaimed, pointing at the light. But just as Dranakir looked up, the light suddenly disappeared and the deafening tumult abruptly ceased. As they looked back, the levitating row floated back down to their original positions and were still. Nothing moved. Even the wind had stopped. In the aftermath of such a tremendous oral assault, the silence was unnerving.
My lady, come in. Do you read me?
The moment the dagger clattered to the ground, the chanting came to a jarring stop. Janus shook her head at the sudden absence of sound and glanced at the frozen upright bodies behind her, then back at the table. The sheet was drenched in blood, the distribution indicating a severe abdominal injury. She pulled it away and braced for the oncoming grief, but it never came. Lying on the table was a large decapitated body. The stomach had been cut open and the innards removed. In their place lay the victim's head, a female head. Relief and disgust hit her like a thunderhammer. She turned and aimed her bolt pistol at the hooded figure, who was in the process of standing up. But before she could say anything, it spoke. "Heretic scum is no way to greet your kin, dear sister."
Jackor?